Kalamazoo, Michigan, and the one and only Kevin Van Dam. KVD, how are you?
Dave, I am doing great, man. It's a shame that we're not together in person, actually, but this is the next best thing.
Yeah. Worse because I know that room. I know what's on the other side. You're directly looking at one of my favorite parts of your house, which happens to be the bar, our cocktail lounge, whatever you want to refer to it as. How's the festive season? What is festive season like for KVD?
It's been busy. Anymore, there's no off season, and honestly, October, November, and December get really even crazy. But we really try to shut it down about mid-December through Christmas. Our family's gotten a lot bigger with all my nieces and nephews getting older, and now they're having kids, and Jackson's in Nashville now, but he's coming home for Christmas, and Nicholas is still here, and just like I say, everything is it just seems to get more crammed in. And but the holiday season is something my wife is, Sherry is super festive, right? So the Christmas lights, the decorations, and all the planning for having our families to get together, and that. And again, as we get bigger, that means more days. So it's a lot of fun. I look forward to it. We have a lot of food, fun, a few cocktails for sure, and just a lot of, it's a great time to kind of chill through, the first of the year, and then we hit the ground running.
Yeah. What 30th anniversary this week? Did you do anything to celebrate, you and Sherry?
We had a nice dinner at home. We made a quick trip to Chicago right before it to just, the holiday season in New York or Chicago. It's great to see all the decorations and lights and things like that. And she loves to shop. I've been on several hunting trips and things like that, so I've got to do that. And we're going to do something special. It's just not a good time. It's so busy with the holidays, and that right now would be a bad time for us to take a trip, to celebrate for ourselves. But it's pretty amazing. It doesn't seem like 30, and we've been together for 35 years. And, she's, as she's an amazing part of the reason I am who I am, and very important part of our brand and our business. But she doesn't like to be in the limelight at all. Like, she doesn't want to be on camera. She doesn't like take any credit for anything, but she's always there behind the scenes. We just finished up our holiday giveaways on our social, and that's all her. She does an amazing job on that, and people really like, of course, who doesn't like free stuff, right? But it goes real well, and she's just a very giving person, does a lot for a lot of other people. And that's one of the things I love about her, is how much she cares to make things special for other people, to do things for other people, to help out other organizations, other charities. We do a lot with our foundation, but and she's the driver of all of that.
There would be no KVD without SVD. She's an amazing.
We all, it's very similar, Zona and you and I are very similar in a lot of ways, and our wives are very engaged in all three of our businesses and lives. And it's great to that's why it works, because they are such an involved, engaged part of what we do.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned your brand, so I want to get right into that, because I would say in pro fishing, you're by far the most, and I know you're going to be like, no, but you're the most pronounced brand, most epic, like ever. The KVD, was that a Tim Tucker thing? That wasn't something you grew up
funny.
with,
I never. And you look at it now, and how many people are, they just use. I think the first, and it wasn't me, it wasn't my idea, but that was Tim Tucker that actually did that. And it just kind of stuck. It worked through the media, and it's where it all started. And then since then, you look at a lot of other anglers, have copied that, which, obviously it for good reason.
Yeah, no, it's very cool. And there's people that it's weird. I see people and how they interact with you. At times, people don't even refer to you as a person anymore. You become, you know what I mean? Like it's
it's flattering and humbling to me. You know, I mean, it's something that we worked hard at. Again, that's a big thing that Sherry's engaged in is, you know, our brand, my image, you know, I mean, just everything from the, you know, I've always wore black pants or black shorts, and our color scheme and logo and all of those things. I mean, it's not by accident that we've grown it to this. Obviously, having a lot of success on tour over the years is a big reason. And it took a while, you know, to get there, but without a doubt, those ESPN years when ESPN owned Bass, and you know, I won a lot of Angler of the Year titles then and classics during that time period. And it just brought the sport to the mainstream sports fan. And, you know, a lot of people don't give them that credit, but ESPN was the greatest thing that ever happened to bass fishing, I think. And I'm one of the benefactors for sure of that era.
Totally agree. I totally agree. Do you remember the first time you ever heard the KVD term? Like, and if you do remember that, did you ever imagine that it would literally dominate aisles in a Bass Pro Shops?
You know, it was Tim Tucker, and it was when it really took was at one of the press conferences at the Classic, you know, after a day on the water. You know, he'd say it, and then, you know, some of the other writers that were there, they picked up on it. And that's where, you know, I mean, as far as media then, you know, newspapers back in the day, in the early days, were a big part of it. So having a headline KVD instead of Kevin Mendez, you know, so that's really where it kind of grew and spawned and blossomed from. And then we just kind of, you know, I didn't ask for it, but it was handed to me, so we just kind of rolled with it. And today it's, you know, it's pretty cool that kids come up to you and they don't call me Kevin, they say KVD, you know. And, you know, just anywhere I go up and down the road, or gas stations, or any, you know, in the mall or on vacation or anything like that, people, you know, you see them do that double take and that. So it's really it's pretty special for sure.
One of the most special things in our sport, and I don't think anyone ever really talks about it, like I think anglers know it, but is those relationships, like the relationship you had with Tim Tucker, the relationship you have with Louis Stout, the relationship you have with, you know, countless outdoor writers. How important has that been in your career?
Well, you know, media has changed exponentially. But back in the day, that's what it was. It was really working with those local outdoor writers, regional outdoor writers. And, you know, Ray Scott was so smart in the very beginning to get all those guys there, not just Ray, but Bob Cobb and Ray both. You know, I mean, they planned that out. They would invite these people. And, you know, those early classics for me, that's the focal point, was that the media that was there. It wasn't about, I mean, there was TV, but back then the shows were, you know, the Classic would be on a month later, you know, I mean, till it was on TV. Now everything's live, and, you know, there's social media, and it's just that world has changed. But those relationships were really, really important. You know, my local sports writer that I first started with was definitely Louis Stout and Bob Gwiz. Those guys were both from this region. And, you know, Bob worked for the Booth papers, which was all of the major ones around Michigan, all the Michigan different cities and that. And we would go out on a fishing trip, take some pictures and that, and he'd do a piece on there. And Louis was the same way. You know, I mean, we did stuff, you know, he was in the kind of the South Bend area, and we would do that stuff. And then also it would end up in, you know, Bassmaster magazine. So, and Bob would write some stuff for Bassmaster. So it's just, you know, all of those days, you know, the In Fisherman, Bassmaster, you know, Bass Times, Bass, and all those magazines, and then really these regional papers, and having the classics move around to different areas, even though, you know, it took me a while to win one. I was still usually, you know, one of the favorites going in or whatever. So I'd get a lot of media, and that really helped start that fan base for sure. But it was the next era that really changed it. I just feel lucky. It's funny. Davey and we were down at Whoville Ranch with Zona and Combs and Hank Cherry, all of our fishing group down there, and Tom. And I mean, we had this conversation about we just feel like, the greatest era in professional bass fishing we got to be a part of. And it is when we were kind of both in our prime, and really, when Davey won the Classic and Angler years through that time. And again, the ESPN, that time frame, it just really, it was just a fun time to be a part of. Now, not that it's not even better, because I mean, the coverage and the live streaming, and I mean, you can't hide anything anymore. It's just, and with social media and that, it's still, I mean, it's a tremendous time as well. But that was, I mean, those were to me, the glory days.
Yeah. Well, one of your commitment to media, it blows me away. And I don't even know if I ever told you this story, but as busy as you are, and I've always been like, every time I spend time with you, I'm like, you are an idiot. You need to get better at stuff. Because I remember being at your house for one Thanksgiving and getting a text from an outdoor writer and being like, hey, can we do a quick interview together? And I said, I'm away. I responded, away with my family right now. Let's talk on Monday. And I thought, hey, you responded, you're doing your job. The next morning I came up the stairs and you were on the phone with somebody. I had no idea. And then when you got off, it was the exact same outdoor writer that I told I was away with my family. So I realized KVD might be better at this than me. But social media, positive or a benefit in the way, like you went from a part of this industry where literally all you had to do talk to outdoor writers, and now literally you're talking to situations like this, you know what I mean? Like it used to be like a weekly occurrence where people you'd post weekly. Now it's daily, hour, like depending on who you are. I mean, it's non freaking stop.
Yeah. Social media is, it's a very powerful tool, very important tool. Sponsors definitely demand it for sure. And I'm different than some. I mean, like some guys, they're posting 17 times a day. I'm not that way. We do it on a much more scaled back, but more. I mean, it's important to blend a little bit of your lifestyle along with things where you're talking about a new product for a sponsor, and that, because you know how it is. You post about a new bait today and a new electronics tomorrow, and that's people like, oh, all you're trying to do is you're always just trying to sell something. Well, it's part of my job for sure, but it's also, there's a lot of people that follow us that they want to know, what the key settings are for Mega Live, right? For instance, or, how you have your boat set up, and that, one of the most popular things that I do is that my boat walk around video each year, and just going through and seeing how I have it set up, how I have things placed, how you have your electronics rigged and wired, and your battery system, lithiums. And, this, people want to, a lot of people want to know that. And so social media is a great platform to do that. Also, obviously YouTube channels, and we do a lot of live stuff. You're doing podcasts like that. I do quite a few of them now as well. And it's just such a critical way. I mean, back in the day, what I looked forward to every Sunday was, the TNN days of watching that block of fishing shows, right? Now you can watch whatever you want, when you want, My Outdoor TV, you can go back and look at every past episode of, your show or Zona's show, or, Bassmasters, or Major League Fishing, anything you want to see, when you want to see it. And same thing. And now with all these streaming services, I mean, you can find anything you want, and you can, the other cool thing that I love about social media and YouTube is that you can literally find a video on how to do anything. So for a beginner or somebody, there's no, I think people used to be afraid to go into a place like DNR Sports and say, hey, how do you tie a knot? Or how do you rig a Texas rig worm, or some of these basic things? Now you can learn how to tie an FG knot 67 ways with a YouTube video, and Texas rig a worm, or advanced drop shot techniques, or, watch 4,600,000 videos, from me in the past, from tournaments or fishing, or, old Bass Pro Outdoor World shows or anything like that. So it's to be able to find all that media. That's what is really awesome about the technology and where we're at today.
You mentioned DNR, and we had a guest a few weeks ago, Larry Nixon, that told a story about DNR and meeting a young KVD. And I'm assuming you've seen the story by now. And if you haven't, please don't embarrass me by saying you don't watch it, and tell me you did.
Well, so this has came up multiple times with Larry Nixon over the years, so my saying would be, and God love Larry, but why would you let the truth get in the way of a good story, right? So the truth of that scenario was, when I first started fishing, our store, my brother's store, DNR Sports, you've been there multiple times. You've done the spring show there. Is always, it's for an independent retailer, marine dealer like that. It's an awesome weekend, right? And it's great for the fans. It's great deals on products. You bring in a lot of pros and do seminars. And early on, he's been doing it, for whatever, 40 something years now. So it's really built into a big deal. So early on, getting some of the top pros was not necessarily super easy, but through Tracker, Larry was on the Nitro team, and Tommy Martin, we got some of those guys to come. And when I first started fishing, I just was enamored with all of them, with Larry, with Rick Klon, with Danny Brower, with Guido Hibden, with Hank Parker, Roland Martin. I wrote a term paper in high school on Roland Martin's 101 bass catching secrets, and got an A+. And it's because I was interested in fishing, and it worked out. And I told Roland that story, and he got a big kick out of it, but I just watched those guys on TV and grew up watching them and reading them about them in Bassmaster magazine. And I just wanted to see just how good they were. So we had Larry Nixon scheduled to come to the in-store promotion, and I was so nervous. I couldn't even talk to him. I couldn't approach him. I couldn't go up to him and say hi, introduce myself. I was freaked out so bad that Larry Nixon was there. He was Mr. Megabucks, right? He won all. He's just an incredible fisherman. Rick Klon was the godfather of pattern fishing and power fishing and things like that. But Larry Nixon, to me, was the most versatile, best angler, just everywhere he went, and just, really good at finding fish quick and things like that. And I was just like, he was like a god to me, And so when he came to the store, I couldn't even talk to him. So throughout the day, I'm running around. I was working then selling boats and tackle and doing all the things that I had. And these guys do their seminars. And my team partner, Don Stevens, he grew up fishing with me and my brother a lot, taught me a lot. And we fished a lot of stuff together, started fishing BASS together. And he walked up to Larry, and he's the one that told him, he said, "Hey, see this kid right here? He's going to be kicking your asses in the future." His exact words. And Larry turned that around and says that I said that. I don't know how that got changed. He is getting pretty old, and your memory starts to go a little bit. But like I said before, why let the truth get in the way of a good story? So he has told that story multiple times to me, around me, to people that I'm with. And it's embarrassing to me to this day, because I was very confident, but I was not, no way would I ever have dreamed. I couldn't even talk to him. I was sweating and shaking when I at that moment, when I that was the first time that I actually spoke to Larry that weekend when he came to the store, was when Don made that introduction. I was too nervous to introduce me. That's how Don introduced me to him.
Wow.
That's the real story.
Larry's story's cooler, Kevin. I gotta be honest. Yeah. It's very Tom Brady-esque when he told Robert Kraft, "I'm the best decision this franchise has ever made." And so the truth, I like both stories. The truth is always kind of just a little less exciting.
The truth doesn't usually make it near as good a story, but That's how it went down.
So riddle me this: young, growing up, like, were you? What age did you decide in your head? Like, when was the first time you said, "Man, this is what I want to do"?
Well, I learned pretty early on that tournament fishing was something that I really liked and enjoyed. You know, I fished my first tournament when I was 14 with my older brother. It was a team tournament, and we ended up finishing second. And during that time, it was an October tournament at a little local lake called Pine Lake, real close to where I live. And I caught most of the bass. I really caught all the bass that, and the funny part of this is Don Stevens, who was I originally, after that, I started fishing tournaments with him, and his partner won the tournament, and they won it by like, they had like 19 pounds. And my brother and I, we had like 14, almost 15 pounds for 4 fish. It was a cold October tournament. I caught him on a black and blue jig with pork. Remember the Uncle Josh pork? And my brother caught one little 12-inch keeper, and I caught 3 big ones. And we had like right at 15 pounds. And because I caught the fish that won the money, I thought I should get all the money. And my brother paid for the gas, the entry fee, everything. And he had to go over, and he's like, "Hey, Don, you got to tell Kevin then team tournaments, this is how this works." So that's how I met Don Stevens, was there at that tournament. After that, you know, Don and I started fishing together. By the time I turned 16, I joined a bass club here in Kalamazoo, Cal Valley Bass Club. And I won Angler of the Year in our club the first year as a non-boater, and was a boater the second year, and again, the start of the federation. And I just, when I was 18, I just like, man, you had to be 18 to fish the Bassmaster Opens. And back then it was the Opens, or the Invitationals, they were called, 6 Invitationals. And that's when the BP Top 100 started. So Angler of the Year was 6 Invitationals combined with the 4 BP Top 100s, and the top performer after the season was your AOY. So my first year full time was, you know, I fished a couple of tournaments. I fished one when I was 18 at Thousand Islands in New York, learned a hard lesson, I drew out with Ron Shear, and I let him talk me out of, I had a great pattern right across from Clayton, throwing a lipless crankbait on a flat there, I was catching like 13, 14 pounds of smallmouth a day practice there. And we made this giant long run, because he's like, "Oh, we catch a 4-pounder every cast where I'm going to go," you know. And he was making the long run to the power plant the other side of Henderson Bay and fishing the discharge. And back then we didn't have the weather forecasting, and my gosh, we were out there in an 18-foot Ranger, and it was like 8 to 10 footers, and we never made it down there. We tore all the electronics and trolling motor off. We floated around a little in Chameau Bay, each caught 1 keeper, and the next 2 days I came back to my fish right there across the way in a nice little protected bay, and caught 13, you know, caught a good sack each day. And Ken Cook ended up winning the tournament with less than 45 pounds. So I was like, dang, you know, I could have won my first tournament, but it would have probably been bad to do that. So I learned a good lesson, you know, then about how to.
Why would it have been bad?
Because you don't want to, you know, you have to. I think if you go in and just have that kind of success right out the gate, you don't learn to appreciate what it takes, you know. And what I learned is not to be intimidated by the best of the best out there. I mean, that Rick Lunn or Larry Nixon, if you get paired with those, and I'm sure lots of people back then, because it was pro on pro, you stand in the front deck, you flip for your boat, whatever. You spend half the time on each other's fish, whatever it was. So I learned real quick how to manage that, not get intimidated. And, you know, the first year when I started full time, you know, I finished 3rd in my first tournament at Thousand Islands. It was the first kickoff of the season. And a lot of those guys didn't really give me much respect, because I ended up fishing with Dave Fenton, he was in 3rd place going the last day. I was in like 12th, or 9th or something like that. I was close to the top 10, and I was fishing the lake, and it was supposed to blow. So I went with him to his fish in Lake of the Isles. He was flipping jigs, and he just got real nervous and was fishing too fast. And I caught him behind him, you know, and it's like some of these, Guido Hibden ended up winning that tournament. But a lot of these guys thought it, you know, I was doing, or no, Dusty Pine won that tournament. The Rat.
Come on. Dude, that is one of my most, like, that's
one of the greatest
VCR
Bassmaster
tapes
shows ever.
Yeah, Dusty Pine on the Rat.
Yeah, But anyways, So I finished third there, and you know, we fished a few other tournaments, and I ended up finishing almost won. Guido Hibden won the St. John's River, and I finished second there in Rodman, and I should have won that one too, but you know, had a really good year and finished first in the points, and then qualified for the top 100. So you know, that first year I was rookie of the year. The next year I won Angler of the Year. You know, my first first qualifying season that I could on tour, and won it. You know, I won a tournament at Lake Lanier, that top 100 there in December, right before Sherry and I got married. So it was, you know, that was a big deal, you know, to have a good start like that to my career. And then, you know, those guys really, because I was running a Nitro, part of the Bass Pro team, you know, Larry and Tommy really took me under their wing and helped me out a lot. Denny Brower's another, you know, Denny and Shirley were great friends of ours and Sherry's, and those guys taught me so many things, not about fishing, but about what it's like to be a pro, the business side of it, and more importantly than anything, how to compete out there, you know, respect the people that you're fishing against. And really, Denny taught me more than anything. I mean, starting out, I had a record, I think 23 tournaments in a row in the money, but you know, and I won that one at Lanier, but I really was so focused on making sure that I got a check that I didn't take those chances. So hanging around Denny and seeing how he did things, and you know, he would go for broke on that third day just to have a chance. And I've seen him win a few tournaments, and so he really taught me what you have to do to win, right? The mentality, the mental aspect, because and still today, the most valuable asset any pro angler has is right there, what's between your ears. That's the difference, because everybody's great now. Like, they all have unbelievable electronics, mapping, you know, you can do all kinds of research and Google Earth, and everybody's good at every technique. You know, they've got all the tools and equipment. What separates the best anglers in the world now is still the same thing that it did then. It's just that the competition has gotten a lot closer, but it's all about those decisions and on the water, and knowing when to do what, and to make those adjustments and change. And you know, you hear people say that all the time. It's like, well, you know, I'm going to go for broke. I'm going to swing for the fence today. Well, I can look at somebody, and I'm not going to name names, but I bet, you know, I've seen that so many times. The final day of the Classic, you know, the final day of a lot of different tournaments, you know, where somebody's a little bit behind, or even if they're in the lead, I can see it in their eyes that they don't believe their own words, you know. And the guys that do, that have that laser focus and burning a hole through you, that's the ones you watch out for.
You say Brower did a lot to teach you that. Did you not show up with a certain level of confidence? Like,
oh, for sure.
I mean, you had to, because when I look back at the first time I ever heard your name, and I don't think I've ever told you this, but the first time I ever heard the name Kevin Van Dam was from two Michigan dudes who used to come to Ontario and fish tournaments, Bill Robinette and E.B. Smiley. And I remember they said, oh, there's this kid from Michigan, and he's going to win everything. And I remember thinking, like, a kid from Michigan, like, there's no, at that time, there was honestly very, very few people from the North at all that fish tournaments. Did you have to overcome a lot? I mean, I'm sure that everybody didn't roll out the red carpet and welcome you.
Yeah.
Right away.
I actually got a lot of pushback from from the Southern pros and some of the old timers for sure in the beginning, but nobody told me I wasn't supposed to win. Right. I believed, and I came in with that kind of confidence. And, you know, it's interesting in talking with Rick Clunn years later, because early on, when I won my first Angler of the Year title, it was him and I battling down to the end, and he expected me to fold, you know, and at Lake Norman. And, you know, I really had a really good event, you know, there, and one Angler of the Year walking away. And, you know, he didn't want to really talk to me or anything, which I respect him for that during it, because he's like, he didn't want to try and intimidate me to try to beat me out of winning Angler of the Year that year. And that was 92. And, after the fact, him talking to me, he's like, you have that youthful enthusiasm. And a lot of people thought that I was cocky or arrogant. And maybe I was, but it was not intentional. It was just, I had a lot of confidence. But when I say Denny taught me how to win, I'm just watching how he did things and his decision-making process, and that it changed my mentality of how I approached those tournaments when you were in position, when you had an opportunity to get close. And obviously once you've won once, then you know what it feels like, and you know what it takes. And it goes in streaks. I've been fortunate to win a bunch over the years. And I can tell you this is that every single time it's more special than the time before. The last tournament I won was a Bass Pro Tour event at Chickamauga, and it'd been a few years, and I know how hard it is to put yourself in that position. And it meant, I definitely shed some tears on camera on that final day when it was going down, because I know how special that is. And it's the same thing a few years prior to that. Remember, I hadn't won in a while, and everybody's like, what's KVD's won his last event, he's washed up or whatever. And then I won Toledo Bend and then Cayuga, and I won, knocked off 3 in a row, or 3 in pretty short order. You can't plan it, and it's so special. And I've watched that so many times over the years. I remember the year that David Fritz won Angler of the Year. I remember the first year that Davey Height won Angler of the Year, where you're in a zone and the schedule lines up to fit your style, and you see these guys get on these amazing runs. You can, and you can see it with, Polinick this year it's almost every single year. I watched, a few years back, Brent Chapman won Angler of the Year. Yeah. Just saying without fail, you see guys come out of nowhere and just get in their own. And again, a lot of it's timing, it's confidence, it's schedule, all rolled into one. I wish you could plan it out, because it'd be, but you can't, it's been fascinating over my career, which, I've been doing this 32 years now professionally, to see that. And it still is special, and I am for sure a student and a fan of the sport still to this day. And it's crazy. People ask me all the time, they're like, man, when are you going to retire? Or is it still fun? I am learning more at every tournament I fish now than I ever have. It's just, the learning curve is still, you're never going to get there. You're never complete. You never finished. You never know it all. And if you think you are, then you better quit, because it's impossible. And like I said, that's the thing. I love the competition, and you said that a little bit ago, the people in the sport are what really, really makes it special to this day. I've been fortunate to really be close to a whole lot of really special people, starting with Bob Cobb and Ray Scott in the beginning. Those guys really, I think they saw what it meant for somebody, a young kid from the North, to get involved in the sport. It was a big spark for BASS at the time, and it was great for me too, and they really embraced me. And then over the years, so many people there at Bass, and around the industry too, even competitors, I've had so many people from direct competitive companies, other boat brands, other motor companies, other electronics companies say, just, man, thanks for what you do and how you do it, because you really helped all of us, in driving this industry. And it's what I have a passion for. So I love it, man. I just feel so lucky to have had the career that I've had, and to met and known so many great people, yourself included. I might have helped you back in the day.
Yeah, no, you've helped me a lot. You've helped. I've openly said many times, without you and Zona, there's no way I work for Bass. And I can never stop thanking for that. Was there ever a moment like along the way where you were like, hey, Zona, I think we really screwed up?
Well, we've done, not about you. But Zona and we've had many conversations about things we wish we did different, but usually it's about a place we filmed a show or something like that, you know. But no, it's, you know, in the end, there are a lot of things changed, a lot of things happened. You know, I've competed for a lot of years in a lot of different formats, fish, you know, with BASS forever, then started Major League Fishing a long time ago. And you know, when the split happened with the Bass Pro Tour and that, I mean, that was a rough time for all of us, and still is, you know. It's for, you know, for some people, but it's disappointing to me in how certain people have handled it. But overall, you know, I think that it's been really good. You know, I mean, competition is what drives innovation for sure. I mean, why do you think that we have what we have going on in forward facing sonar right now? Because of that competition between Garmin, Lowrance, and Humminbird. You know, and look at the quality of the products that we have. And the same with the tours. You know, I mean, the FLW tour, I don't think was near as big of a challenge for the fan base and sponsor base as what Major League Fishing, you know, has become. And now that, you know, FLW is part of MLF and Bass is there, I mean, there's obviously a lot of competition between the anglers, the sponsors, and that. And it's been interesting. I think it's given a lot of people a lot of anglers especially opportunities that they wouldn't have had. And the technology is there now with the streaming that obviously, you know, as much live bass fishing is on right now, and as great as the ratings are for everybody, you can't have too much. So I think overall that's been good. The toughest part about it has been some of the relationship things. It's, you know, it's been disappointing on some levels with some of that, but you know, time seems to heal all wounds. And, you know, it's very easy to look back at things and say, man, I wish this would have went differently, or I wish, you know, this I would have made this decision then, or different things like that, for sure. No doubt as a rough period for all the anglers, for the leagues, for the industry. You know, it's a challenge, but in the end, it's created a lot of opportunities for a lot of people, and it's created a great competition that I think a lot of the companies have benefited from.
Yeah. I mean, there's definite beneficiaries from it. And I think you're right. Time heals all. You know what I mean? But that in mind, Larry Nixon's back on the Elite Series. Is there a chance that we'll ever see Kevin Van Dam back at Bass?
Gosh, you never know what would happen. I'd miss a lot of the people there, especially you know, the group at JM. A lot of the camera guys, and, you know, Wes and Mike McInnes. I, you know, was at the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame this year, and Mike and I had a really good conversation. You know, again, the people are what makes this industry really special, and it's really across the board, but especially people that have been there for a long time. Because I've been there a long time. I mean, I think back to people like, again, Ray Scott and Bob Cobb. You know, it's great to see Bob at the Hall of Fame this year, but even other people that have just been around. Like, you look at a Jesse Simpkins, who, I mean, I worked with for Plano for 17 years, and now he's on with St. Croix. But I mean, he's one of those guys that's been around forever, that a lot of people don't know in the industry. But if you're in the industry for a long time, you know a lot of those type of people. And even, again, like I said, people that are competitors or work for competitive companies that I've gotten to be friends with over the years, that's what makes it real special to me. And one of the things I love about our sport and our industry that I think is very different than, you know, the NFL or Major League Baseball or any other, you know, leagues or sports, or even, you know, NASCAR has a community like that too. You know, I mean, I can tell you this, you know, fishermen as a whole are just really good people. You know, I mean, if I'm driving down the highway and I got a flat tire, and one of these Elite Series guys comes by and sees me or something like that, they're going to pull over and help me, the same as I've would, or say, hey, they're at an event and they got a broken depth finder or trolling motor and I've got a spare, I'm gonna help them out or let them use your boat or whatever it takes. I mean, there's a fraternity there amongst us that it is pretty good, especially like I say in the older group. There's so many new anglers now that I just don't even know. That's the thing that's one of the striking things to me is these young kids coming up. I watched the beginning of college fishing, and now to watch the boom in collegiate anglers and all of that, expanding. You look at the Lee brothers; they were the beginning of that, and now look, I mean, they're veterans on tour. So it's pretty interesting to see that. But a lot of these young kids now that are coming up on the Elite Series and that are coming into the Bass Pro Tour, it's like, I never heard of this kid before. And you look at Patrick Walters, look at all these kids that come right out the gate and do real well. Brandon Polinick he's not a kid anymore, right? I mean, he's not that young guy anymore.
Yeah.
Ike and Ellie, look at him, dude. He acts like he's a kid, but I mean, he's been doing this. I don't remember what year he won the Classic in New Orleans, but it was
2003.
2003. Yeah. So, I mean, man, he's 20 plus years out there now. I mean, you look at Swindle's one of the oldest guys on the Elite Series now, I mean, as far as number of years competing in that. And I remember, I drew him in one of his first tournaments, so it's just like, man, it goes by quick.
People talk. So you're saying that you might be back one day.
You never know. I never rule anything out.
All right. We'll cut all of that out and you'll answer just with that. No.
Okay. Yeah. KVD's coming back to the Elite Series.
It's going to be a title for the podcast.
There you go.
A lot of people talk about how intimidating you are to compete against. And I'll be honest, like when I first joined the Elite Series as the MC, I had seen it from the outside, but to really just see you had such a mental advantage over a lot of anglers for a long period of time, but you intimidate a lot of people growing up or in the Elite Series just through what you've accomplished. Who intimidated you the most when you first started fishing top level tournaments?
Well, early on, I was intimidated by all those guys. But again, that first tournament, that lesson that I learned with, drawn out with Ron Shearer, which at the time he was a big name pro, that was a lesson that I learned. It's like, hey, Larry Nixon, he's out there, in the same body of water, making the same casts as me and Rick Clun, all those guys. I mean, when I first started fishing, Jimmy and Roland, Rick, Hank Parker just retired. He won the Classic and the James River and retired. So I never got to compete against him, but Hank and I have been good friends for my whole career. I mean, he was one of those guys I really looked up to. Guido Hibden was very intimidating. It really, more importantly, Stella, his wife, was really intimidating. They're just very different. Denny was very intimidating to me until I got to know him. But that's something as an angler, you better get over real fast, and you're right. I never really tried to, but it was interesting to see that. I mean, early on, Aaron Martins was that way. I mean, I could tell by the way he acted towards me that I didn't have to do anything. Crete was probably the guy that was the funnest for me to mess with. And I mean, we're great buddies, but for a while, I know that I was very intimidating to him and I didn't even have to try, but it was fun to, even pour gas on that fire a little bit, so I have a ton of great friends out there for sure. And it's interesting to me to hear stories from other people that'll tell you things like that and about a situation or a time on the water. And I didn't, but I mean, I'll promise you this is I've always, my whole career, people say whatever they want to say, but I mean, I have always fished my own way, my own style. I don't get help from people. I don't get information. I just don't fish like other people. It just don't work. And, Davey and Scott were longtime roommates of mine. They can attest to that. I mean, but still to this day, people think, oh, Kevin, he won at Kentucky Lake because he's got all this help from people, or he did all the, you can't, there's no consistency in that. I mean, I've watched a lot of anglers over the years that did get a lot of help all the time, and you know who they are as well. And you just, boy, if they get good information, they're doing good, but they just rely on it so heavily that it would bite them, and I was a big advocate of the no information rule. That definitely was pushed by my era, and I was a leader in that, where it was, these off limits and no information. I mean, today we're fishing on the Bass Pro Tour under the strictest no information rules that there's ever been. And, I'm sure people are still, I'm sure people are still trying to get around it, for sure. And maybe a few are, but overall, I mean, that's all I've ever wanted, is to compete against a level playing field, when it comes to that. Obviously, if you go to Florida and it's a mat flip and bite, guys like Bobby Lane are going to, they're going to shine for sure, because that's their background. I mean, and if you do a northern smallmouth event, man, I understand smallmouth. I mean, guys are going to have an advantage, but just getting waypoints and things like that. And that's what's a little bit frustrating to me about this new generation that's coming up, is, a lot of high school and college anglers, they're just like, hey, we got to go here. And I mean, I get calls and stuff from people all the time want me to give them the waypoints, right where to go, and the cast angle. And I'm like, no, that's not how you learn. And the good anglers that come up and that are consistent, they're not going that route. There's no consistency in fishing other people's fish.
The mental side of the sport, which we've talked about, did you ever, like you said, it was a little fun with crate and stuff like that, but I feel like, dude, there was years there when I would interview anglers that take off in the morning, and every one of them would say whatever they had for breakfast, whatever they had. And there was times where and you could intimidate people without saying very much. Well, they better catch them today, because I know I'm going to, stuff like that. When you hear documentaries like, The Last Dance with Jordan, he talks about how much that mental side of things he used to motivate himself. Was that ever a thing with you?
I've always had a lot of confidence. And the one thing that I think that I've always been really good at is truly understanding what potential my patterns, or where I was at in a tournament. I mean, you fishing a 3 or 4 day event is much different than a 1 day event. And you have to plan for the future. You have to fish for the future. You have to practice for the future. And you look at the weather forecast and all those things. And I always had a really good understanding of, when I was fishing something that was going away, or if I was fishing something that was coming to me. And it just gives you a lot of confidence in some of those situations. And I wasn't scared to speak, what I thought, what I felt in my head. And yeah, it is, there's part of it that I'm sure there's some gamesmanship to it. I wouldn't say that it was that I just did it intentionally, but and you can't always back it up, but in a lot of cases, I did. There's a Kid Rock song about that. It ain't cocky and let you back it up. So yeah, I no doubt that I was fully aware in a lot of situations what was going on there.
Your style of fishing, everybody talks about speed, and many people have adopted that, and you've seen it go through different. Was that, I believe that's something you brought to the sport. You took, like, there's fast anglers, but dude, I fished a pond with you and can't keep up. Like, you never stop moving. It's amazing. Yeah. Was that just something always that the way you fished, or was that something you designed or developed over years on tour?
It's a combination, it's my DNA for sure. I'm pretty, probably should have been on Ritalin as a kid. And, my wife still says I'm ADD and maybe HD, a little extra still. But it is, when you're competing in these multi-day events, I learned real quick on that style is going to suit you much better to be able to find enough fish, have enough patterns, learn enough about the lake to have options for a 4-day event. And a lot of people, I don't think, just had that mentality or made that transition, but I learned that real early on. And it really suited me. That, again, that's why I had such a level of consistency. I think, Rick, when I started is I always had options and something to fall back on. If conditions changed or we got a big front that came in, I had seen an area that I knew I could go to and get some bites. It's truly knowing yourself, knowing your strengths, and knowing your weaknesses. Over the years, I've worked on that. And when I really became real dangerous in my career is when I was able to really blend the two together, to know when you got to power fish, cover water, fish fast, and then when you slow down and pound it out and milk a spot, and how to manage that too. Especially once it got to the point where we really started having these big entourages on the water. You go to Kentucky Lake the first week of June, and I was going to be a favorite, and I'm, at the takeoff the first day, I've got 50 people following me, before I've ever even made a cast, and to manage that, because you're never going to get to fish. There, Gunnersville, Kentucky Lake, two of the worst places, for that. You're never going to get to fish a spot twice. So being sneaky and, one tournament there, I started out the day, and Bobby Lane ended up winning that tournament that year. But I started that tournament with coming out of Paris Landing and had, 75 boats following me. And I'm like, I'm not going to go. I had 5 mega schools found, mega schools, like where you couldn't make a cast without catching big ones every throw. And I'm like, I knew that if I could, a couple of them might get found, but if I could fish one of those every day, that I'd win the tournament, And so I didn't even fish anything. I started running, just trying to lose these guys heading towards the dam, running north. And at 1:30, and I got to be in at 3 something or 3:15 or whatever like that. At 1:30, finally the last boat, and I was all the way down near the dam, which is, an hour away from takeoff. And the last boat turned around and headed back. I waited about 15 minutes and let those guys go. And then I run all the way back down north, stopped on a place. My first cast, I hooked a great big one. It looked like about a 7-pounder. It jumped off on a 6XD. The plug hit the water and another 7-pounder ate it. And then, I had 27 or 28 pounds in 7 casts there, and then rode into the weigh-in. And, Bobby even had more that first day. But that's just what how I had to compete. I couldn't even fish anything that I wanted to fish until the very end, because, once you do that once, you'll never get, those spots like that I'd worked so hard to find, you'll never catch them on it again, never fish them again. The bottom don't change. The Great Lakes, Kentucky Lake, the bottom doesn't change. And that's the sad part about when a big tournament comes to town, is it's definitely tough on some of those fisheries.
Yeah. I always think, like, I don't know how many more you could have won if simply just spot lock and live was invented earlier, because live has definitely helped reduce the flotillas. Like, you don't see the 100 boat outside of the, championships, the classic and stuff like that. But you would literally, to find you were always the easiest person to find, because you just look for literally a tournament blast off. And when I think of like how you would manage that, the spectators, the camera person on the back deck of the boat, a drone above you, and you're still, and you're still trying to catch fish. It's unbelievable what, when I look back at, I think in some ways it's easier to win a tournament today just because of just a few of those tools I mentioned.
Yeah, the last tournament that I won at Toledo Bend, that was a zoo, that one. I mean, and I knew going in that I was going to have a good chance there because the water was high, the fish were just starting to move out, and nobody was fishing out. And Lake Master mapping just hit on. I mean, they had just mapped that lower end of that whole lake, and the Lake Master mapping is just dumb, right? It's such one of the most valuable tools that I've ever had in tournament fishing is Lake Master mapping. I've won a lot of tournaments directly because of it. So that one lined up like that. The first day I caught a 20-pound bag on the shad spawn, and then I went out and culled everything on my first offshore spot and had a really big, and by 9:30 in the morning I've got 25 or 26 pounds in the box, and I get to practice the whole rest of the day with nobody watching me or anything. I caught an 8 or 9 pounder and ended up with a really big bag, and that's what it took to win that tournament. Is I had to have get a 5-pound lead right on the first day. And because coming down to the final day, I ended up winning by a good bit, but I mean, it wasn't like I was getting a ton of bites after that because of 75 to 100 boats chasing me around out there, while you're doing it. So I am so thankful for the popularity and that, but that is one of those things that can be very frustrating out there on the water, because 95% of those spectators are fantastic. It's the couple here and there that want to steal your spots, or I guess when you pull up at a place on Kentucky Lake and you catch 15 in a row, they just can't help themselves but to, the second you leave, to go in there and cast. I mean, it's very interesting to hear some of the stories over the years after I leave a spot, what some of the people that stayed and watched how people are there. It's just like, gosh, it's cost me. The first time we fished Grand Lake, that Cliff Pace won, I had a pretty dang special deal, and I caught a 20-pound bag off of it, on a jerk bait. And after that we had left, I mean, these guys just throttled it with an Alabama rig, and one of our officials that lives right there was in his house watching. And after we left, he's like, they stayed there till dark, and they were there before you got there the next morning, and then left because they knew when you're going to show up, and I just can't. Mentality just floors me. But overall, man, I've had just so many special moments. People say, well, man, what's your best win or what's your favorite memory out there, man? I've had so many of them. It's pretty awesome. When it all comes together, there's nothing like it.
That Toledo Bend win, the win that many predicted would never happen. I mean, I had accomplished tournament anglers look at me straight in the eye and be like, yeah, Kevin's never gonna win again. Did you change? Like what was it, like a 5-year stretch where literally, I mean, the only hiccups in your career was that first one on Thousand Islands that you talked about. But other than that, I mean, the difference between a good year and a bad year was whether you make the Classic, whether you win Angler of the Year, whether you compete, but you were always up top. So one of the hardest things I would imagine is recovering after a dry spell, which you had never dealt with in your career. What was going through your mind during that time?
I never let that bother me. And, you have to have thick skin. It doesn't matter what sport you're in. I mean, you look at like, I'm a big NASCAR fan, and Jimmy Johnson was one of the nicest guys ever. He won 7 championships in NASCAR, and he's the nicest guy, raced people great, and people hated him just because he won a lot. And that's, to some degree, I had people that didn't care for me or still don't because of the success that I've had, which is, it's hard for me to fathom, but there's people wanting, pulling for me every tournament to not do good. Right. And in my mind, I through that whole period, it really didn't bother me, because I still, even though I hadn't won, I felt like I was good at making good decisions. You get close. You have to have everything line up to win at the top level of this sport in any event, whether it's a 3-day tournament like the Classic. I mean, the Classic should be one of the easiest tournaments to win compared to a 4-day Elite Series event or a Bass Pro Tour event or anything like that. But it's not, because there's so much else that goes into it. And, in my mind, I knew that I was doing all the right things. It's not about my work ethic or how I practice or fish, or I hadn't lost it mentally or whatever. It's just, you got to have things come together. And it's the same thing when I started on the Bass Pro Tour. The first couple of years, man, I didn't have a win or anything like that, or even a lot of great finishes. In my mind, I can look back and it's like, with that, when every fish counts, it's, hey, you're 1 bite or 2 bites here at the cut line, and then, boy, you make the championship round and anything can happen. So it's a tough format to do well in. And it's the same, over the years, I've competed in Angler of the Year and all the different points. We had the E50s back in the day. Every format, every point system, every pounds and ounces, every style, catch, weigh, release for all of them, to the Toyota Texas Bass Classics, to all of them. And, you got to just adapt for each, you got to have a different strategy for any event you're in. A 3-day tournament like the Classic is way different than a 4-day Elite Series event, which is way different than a MLF Cup, right? You have to have the right mindset for each one. And you just got to wait till things till it all comes together. But if, the process is not broke, my style, my system is not broke. I have a system that I use to practice, to fish, to compete. And it's not duplicatable by many people, because we don't think the same. We don't fish the same. We don't work the same. But I know that, it's a pretty solid system. And when everything lines up correctly, it's gonna come together. That tournament there was not a surprise for me to win. Once I saw what I saw in practice, I knew I was going to have an opportunity to win that tournament. It's ones like, so the Cayuga tournament that I won, I think it was the same year, later in the same year. I had no idea in that one. I did not expect to. Jordan Lee started off that tournament in the lead. I was, solid every day. And that last day, none of us had a good day. And, I said, man, I blew it today. I caught about a 15-pound bag and ended up winning the tournament. I don't know what happened that day, but nobody in the top 10 caught him. And that one was a shock. And so those ones are really, really special when it's a surprise. The best moments are when you're going to win before it's going to happen. The Classic in New Orleans, that final day there, I mean, I knew at 10 o'clock that I had it in the bag, and your whole family, my wife, I just know how much she stresses about it. My whole family's there, my boys and everybody like that. They're all worried about it and not, wondering what's going on in the water. And that was a great afternoon for me to just soak in the moment and just know how special it was going to be. My main goal when I came through that Coliseum to the weigh-in was to watch them, to see because, you can't do it without a ton of family support. You can't do it without, a great partner like I have with Sherry. And so to be able to deliver that and to see what it means to them after everything that they've been through and all the travel and the time away and all the sacrifices that your family has to make to live this sport, those are the moments that's probably the most special moment for me that I've had in my career was that, watching my family that way in at that time.
Your career has been incredible, but I mean, your career's not done. What drives you now?
I still, I love the competition without a doubt, but for sure, what I love about this sport is still the people, man. That's what I think is really unique. I've got a lot of great friends out there. I enjoy that that camaraderie. It's different because there's a lot of new people I don't know as well, but we just finished up. We had a team series event in Major League Fishing, and we did a draft for it and all that. It was pretty kind of a weird scenario, but I ended up fishing this with Todd Faircloth and David Walker. I mean, I drafted both of these guys because that's, at the time, based on what I thought, I was like, hey, I know these guys, and I mean, we had so much fun through the process together.
Yeah.
And it's no different than when I get together with Zona or whatever, like our Whoville, our annual Whoville hunt. That is just such a special week. I never got to know Keith Combs like I know Keith Combs, and it's from our time down at Whoville. And Hank Cherry. I've watched Hank Cherry come up when he first started, and his wife Jacqueline was there with us this year too, and just getting to it's that time with friends. And Zona and I have we go so far back. There's so many little things that's what I love about that sport. And the other thing to me is I would never get the opportunity to fish so many great places. Now, we go to some stinkers every now and then. You go to places that aren't great, but I get to fish the greatest places on the planet at some of the best times. And I would never have that opportunity. You just wouldn't do it if you weren't forced to by the tournament schedule. And, the tournament schedule is a grind for sure, but it also is, hey, how many times are you going to go to Toledo Bend in May or Santee and, the 1st of April during the spawn, or how many times am I going to go to the California Delta or Clear Lake, to watch that tournament where Steve Kennedy caught all those giant bass on those big swim baits. I mean, you look back at so many, I would never have gotten to go there. Amistad to Falcon Lake to Toho, Kissimmee Chain, Okeechobee, Potomac River, Thousand Island, Champlain. I mean, we get to fish the greatest places there are. And still to this day, as much pressure as we're getting in that, it's still some of the best fishing we've ever seen. Fisheries are in great shape, and that's what I get excited for. Each year, you might get a little burned out, at the end of the season, but man, come January, I'm re-energized and planning for the year and re-excited to go. And I've, again, 32 years of doing this. You look at guys like Rick Klund. I mean, I don't think there's any way that I'm going to go that long by any means, but I still love it. I definitely love the competition. I love the camaraderie. I love the people that are out there. It's just, while we're talking, I got a message on my phone from Trip Weldon. Trip texted me and Gerald that Harry Potts passed away, and that's a sad text, but Trip and I go way back. To watch him get inducted in the Hall of Fame was pretty special. And that's what's cool about our sport. And I think that's different than a lot of them. And it's the people that, just like any great company, man, it's all about the people.
Do you think the people in fishing are so special because, and I've thought about it a lot, because at times you think, well, maybe they just say that, these guys are different. And I'm sure in every sport, they're like, well, our guys are different, but I truly see over and over again how different. But my theory is it's because everyone got in it for the same reason. They just wanted to fish for a living. Like, people have made a lot of money as a professional angler, but that was never your goal. When you started out, your goal was just to be able to do it. Is that what makes this group so special, do you think?
No doubt. Passion. You are not, if you do not live it and have a passion for it, you are not going to be competitive. You are not going to make it on tour. And, I've had a lot of young anglers come up to me and say, man, what do I need to do? Or what's the thing? Because I had a lot of people tell me when I started, oh, you're never going to make it. It takes 5 years to even think about breaking into it. And, sponsorship's tough. And if coming from the North, it's not going to be an option. And I just never bought into any of that. I mean, if you believe in yourself and you put the work in, you can accomplish anything. And I see that in really almost every great angler, the young angler that come in. I mean, it's work ethic, it's passion. If you don't live it, if you're not putting the time in on the water to learn the techniques, to learn the electronics and things like that, you're going to get passed by. And I've watched that with a lot of the anglers that get burned out, and towards the end of their career. And I don't want to be that guy. I mean, when I don't have that fire to wake up at 5 and get out there in the water, and it's 33 degrees and raining, and it's it's not going to be fun and tough. And if I got to force myself to do that, then man, it's time to hang it up. But as long as and that drive to go, why would I? This is what I do. It's my life. It's what I know. So that's why I've done it for as long as that I have. I don't do it for the trophies or the titles or the money or anything. I do it because I love it.
And that shows through and always has. I mean, and I think you're right. For whether it's a TV show, whether it's whatever, if you want to be part of this industry, if you don't love it, if you just like fishing and you think it doesn't work. I mean, and I think that's when you hear groups of anglers talking and you're like, yeah, he's one of us. That's the weird trait that, because you may never have fished with that angler, but that's
you can see it. You see, I mean, you know as well. You're around you get to interview a lot of anglers and a lot of young guys coming in. You see the new group every year coming into the Elite Series, and pretty early on, it's going to be pretty evident to who's going to make it and who's not. And part of it is that right there. I mean, and you can have the work ethic and the motivation and still not, for sure. But without it, you definitely don't have a chance. I mean, it definitely takes a deep drive and passion to be successful. And that's probably true about any sport. I mean, you think about the training that an NFL player is got to go through. I mean, there's no 3-sport athletes in high school anymore. They're just because. And fishing is getting the same way. I mean, they're starting younger, and there's so much more. I mean, there's kids coming in now, and they're in it. Just I think it was different when I started, for sure. I might have been very unique. Today, everybody that's successful that's coming in is doing all the right things and has put the time in, and has, even though they're in their 20s, they have years of experience, seasoned veterans at fishing. Maybe they haven't been to California or other places, but where the region of the country they started from, they're well versed, even at a very young age.
This is a weird question, and maybe you just answered it. But why you? Have you ever stopped to be like, well, I mean, I know you wanted to make a living fishing, but what you've accomplished, eclipses anybody even close. Why you? Why did it happen for you?
Shoot, I don't know. That's a tough question.
Such a KVD answer.
I just, like I say, just all I've been doing is just doing what I love. And I truly care about I care about the sport. I care about the future. I care about the next generation. I care about the fisheries. And I'll tell you, from a conservation standpoint, and that I have learned so much from Johnny Morse. He is such a visionary when it comes to thinking and doing things that don't make sense financially, but are the right thing to do for the future. I mean, he's the greatest conservationist of our era by far, since Teddy Roosevelt. And to see the things, he's a great friend of mine, and to see the things that he's done and he's invested in to ensure the future of fishing, all species, different areas, but and to lead the charge and get people motivated. It's pretty incredible, and it's something that's very important to me, and it's something that I know I have a platform to be able to carry on, and those are the things that I'm thinking about going forward. Is what can I do to help on a large scale for even just get awareness to how important it is to have clean water, how important it is to manage some of these fisheries for aquatic vegetation. You know, I mean, how valuable a lot of these reservoirs are to these economies. You know, I mean, you know it, we live it, right? We see it, but the rest of the world doesn't necessarily think that way. I mean, it's very interesting when you go to some of these, I don't want to even start politics or things like that, but it's mind-boggling to me. But when you grow up and live it, and you see what it means to so many people, and what it can do, the time outdoors, the time on the water, with family spent together, it's special, and it's important, and it's something that we definitely have to protect and conserve going forward. And there's a lot of people that don't think that way, for sure. So, you know, all of that is important to me. And, you know, another thing that really has shown me an area that I have a lot of passion for is this past year, I got elected to the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame board. And the group of board members that they have, and Bowman is Steve Bowman is one of them. And Steve's, you know, obviously a great, you know, media guy, photographer, just got inducted in the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame himself, but he has a passion for the history of the sport. And it bothers me that there's a lot of young kids out there, young anglers, that don't know who Ray Scott was or what he meant to it, or Bob Cobb, or Roland Martin, or Jimmy Houston, or whoever, you know, Steve Quinn, or, you know, I mean, a lot of these people. So, and through that, I've seen that. So you know, that's why, that's another reason that I'm very passionate about trying to give back. And you know, the Hall of Fame is a special place there in the Wonders of Wildlife Museum, and to keep building that, to keep growing that, so that history is preserved, you know, so that people know. Because shoot, someday down the road, there's going to be people that, you know, look back at the early history and it's like, well, what about that Kev Van Dam guy? You know, if those records are that's eons ago, that's meaningless or whatever. Well, it isn't, and that's not why I'm doing it, but it's just so important. You know, I think in anything, history is where you came from is a big determiner of where you're going in the future. You know, they say history repeats itself. So it's important, I think, to preserve that, and to learn from past mistakes on all levels, and you know, ensure that the future is bright for everybody, you know, so that we all got a place to send our grandkids and kids to have great fishing. Because then in the end, if we don't have, you know, really good fishing, you know, we've got all these young anglers engaged and coming in, high school fishing's growing, it's blown up. But if they're not catching anything, and there's no fish in the lakes, no more bass, that's not good for, you know, for anybody. And that's why I've got a passion for conservation.
Who's on your, and there's no right or wrong answer for this, who's on your Mount Rushmore for bass fishing, for tournament angling?
As far as as a competitive standpoint,
wherever, if we have to put a Mount Rushmore up for the people, not just competitors, but I mean, Ray Scott's obviously on it, has to be on, and I would assume.
No doubt. You know, as an angler, you have to really look at, you know, you look at anglers, and there's no doubt that Rick Clunn is there. Larry Nixon is there. You know, Denny Brower's there for sure. You know, I mean, you look at their stats, and you just can't get away from those guys. And I just think Rick, especially in the era that he was, and, you know, people are like, oh man, hear it all the time. Who's the greatest angler of all time? There was ESPN did a debate on it, and Clunn won it. But it's very easy. It's like, hey, you can look at current stuff, or you can go back and look at past. And how do you compare a baseball player from the 50s to now? It's just way different. So, but it's fun, right? But I mean, those are the guys that I really look up to, that really persevered through a lot of different years. You know, I mean, I know there's some anglers that had a great 4 or 5 year run. But you look at the body of work, and how do you not, you know, put Rick Clunn at the mount, on the top of the Mount Rushmore, you know, and Larry and Denny as well. You know, it's just maybe someday, you know, I'll be there as well, you know, but I don't look at myself the same as that. Those are guys that, you know, I grew up watching, and it's a shame that you know, we didn't have that kind of coverage back then, because it would have been, I'd have been way all in early. I mean, to have the kind of coverage we have today. So it's pretty, I say I got to compete in the greatest era of bass fishing. Well, right now, currently, I think is pretty darn special, just because all of the technology and how visible everything is. I mean, for young anglers and or people to learn to get into the sport, there's never been a better time, because you can't miss anything. Why would you want to go out there in the water and follow anybody when you can just watch the live coverage and see 4 different anglers at one time, and you're in their boat? You know, it's amazing.
Was that hard to adjust to? You know, when live first came out, it wasn't like they said, "Hey, we're going to do a little live." It was, I remember, like, "Hey, welcome to the Bassmaster
I was
Classic."
on the set at the Classic the first day and I was like, I knew that was world changing, that moment.
Yeah.
When I was sitting there watching that at Lake Hartwell, I knew that was world changing. And the hardest part was, you know, I've always been able to keep certain things kind of to myself.
Yeah.
So like fishing a jerkbait through all seasons of the year was something that I mean, did I dominate tournaments with it? But man, it was just such a big part of what I did. And live gave that secret away, you know. And now show me an angler, especially with Mega Live and forward facing sonar, that's not an excellent jerkbait fisherman 365.
Yeah.
You have to be, you know. And it wasn't that many years ago that people didn't throw jerkbaits other than in the spring, or, you know, pre-spawn winter, you know. Now it's a year-round tool. And, you know, other little things, you know, hair jigs on, you know, ledge tournaments, or big swim baits, or, you know, I mean, it's Nico rigging, or whatever little tricky thing that you have it as, you know, your strength. You can't hide it anymore. You can't, I mean, there's no missing anything. And that's the great thing and the bad thing about live coverage.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, have
No
you,
secrets.
what stands out to you as things that you've seen on different live coverage and been like, I need to do more of that?
Well, it's the thing that blows me away more than anything is watching how some of these guys think and fish, and I just can't do it. Like some of these Japanese anglers now, I can't fish a cast that's 10 minutes long. I can't fish a cast that's 30 seconds long, you know. The mentality of some guys that are good at some of these finesse techniques and things like that, it's not in my DNA. I just can't do it. But what I do see is the little things, like watching exactly how a guy's turning the handle on his reel, winding a crankbait, or a, you know, swim bait or spinner bait, or whatever it is, you know, seeing those subtle things that, hey, it's not just casting a red eye shad out there and reeling it in, right? You watch how somebody actually fishes that bait that's really good at any technique, whether it's, you know, glide baiting or whatever. So like this past year, Carl Jacobson, right? He's a Minn Kota Humminbird teammate. We got to shoot some Mega Live stuff together. I was right down there in his backyard and went to his house actually to rig you know, target lock on my boat. It was a secret at the time. And I got to spend a little time with Carl out there on Chick, and I know that's his thing. And just to see the detail that he goes into it, and it's not just him. I mean, him and Brandon share a lot of information together, but and exactly how you rig the bait. You know, I mean, that Arashi's glide bait that he throws, the difference of it out of the package to the way that he fishes it, and then the rod, the reel, the line, how you position the boat, what, you know, what you're doing with it, to watch that, and then, you know, to be able to talk to him about it, or, you know, for him to break it down, it's pretty dang cool. You know, I mean, the same thing would be said if I wanted to, and, you know, I think I'm a pretty dang good crankbait guy for ledge fishing. There's so much more to it than just casting it out there and winding it in, right? It's positioning, it's retrieve, it's color, it's your setup, your line size, your hook, everything. There's so many little things to it that, you know, maybe someday I'll break them down. You never know.
Competition. What is your focus level when you're competing? Like in percentage wise, like throughout the day, you leave takeoff. Where are you? Like in your head?
I'm pretty intense. You know, I mean, some guys are not very talkative with their official, or their, so for me, when I have my official in the boat, he's like my partner, right? And it's my thing is I talk through things. That's how I don't keep myself or keep answering my own questions, is I like to talk through it. I explain to him what's going on. That's how I do it. But I'm pretty intense. So I share a lot with my official that nobody else would know. And I'm different than when I have a camera in the boat too. Like, I know knowingly that you don't want to give too much up. And I'm thinking about what's in the background and what they're seeing, and that how I position an area just for that, because you got a 4-day event. But no, my intensity level's pretty, I'm pretty serious. And to be honest with you, on the Bass Pro Tour, where we're scoring every fish that counts, you can't catch you can't have 25 pounds in the box and say, and just relax. There's never relaxing. It's super intense. You know, I think this year, I mean, we're switching. I mean, the anglers voted to go for 5 fish, and I get it. The rest of the world competes in a 5-fish format. The rest of the league, all the series do, but I love the intensity of scoring every, you know, fish, especially once we went to the 2-pound minimum, or, you know, instead of 12-incher, you don't want to score. I don't think anybody's interested in seeing 1-pounders at a place that's got a 15-inch size limit on it, right? But when you go to a place like Fork and we're fishing a 2-pound minimum and every fish counts, it's dang intense there, because you can pull up, as you know, to any spot there and you know, catch 75 pounds in a few minutes.
Yeah.
And so that leads to, and that's the way it was. We had extreme conditions at our event there this year. Man, I was doing good for a while, and it's you just believe at any moment. So it's stressful. I can tell you, I sleep real well at night on tournaments.
So do I take it that you voted to stay for every fish? Was that your?
Yeah. Yep. I think that, and it wasn't even close. But there was a handful of people that really wanted, and I see both sides. I think for me personally, it'll be better being I think, you know, I do better my whole career. I've fished for 5, right? And you want to target big fish. It'll change things immensely, because, you know, nobody wants to go to Red Crest at Charlotte, North Carolina, at Lake Norman, and see somebody put 41 pound 8-ouncers on the score. They want to see how you're going to go there and target the minimum part of the population, which is the biggest fish there, to try to catch a 15+ pound bag a day. You know, so you're going to see, instead of everybody just going around live live sonar fishing for schoolers to throwing jigs around docks and glide baits around the shore and bigger baits, and looking for 5 big ones. So and that's again, that's what tournament fishing started as. So it's probably, it's, even though I like the other format, it's the right choice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was voted on. I was shocked, to be honest. Like I, as a fan of the sport, I thought the every fish counts. It's different. At least, you know what I mean? Like everything doesn't need to be the same, but I'm sure it'll work out pretty good for you. I got one more question for you. It's not even my question. I stole it from my buddy Chris Van Vliet, who has a much more successful podcast than I could ever dream of. But I think it's a great question, and I love asking it, and I have to give him credit. What is the greatest advice you've ever been given in your life?
The greatest advice I've ever been given. Well, never let anybody tell you what you can or can't accomplish. Don't, you know what I mean? Don't, it wasn't in a one sentence thing like that, but it's again, and I've said this many times, if you believe in yourself, you can do anything. And I'm a perfect example of that, is that nobody told me, or everybody told me when I first started out, that you're from the wrong area. You're too young. You know, it's going to take a while for you to be successful. But in my mind, I believed that I could compete. After I fished my very first BASS tournament and saw how the guys went about it and how they did it and experienced it, I knew in my heart I could do it. And even though I had a lot of people telling me not to, and that's something, you know, I've always said, in the back of my truck, you see, it's all about attitude. And that's, you know, one of my sayings. If you got a positive attitude, good things are going to happen. If you got a bad attitude, good things generally don't happen. So attitude is everything. And if you believe, you know, and it may not work out every time, but if you believe it, anything can happen.
Well, I think you've definitely believed it, and you have definitely achieved it. Now, more importantly, how about your red hot Detroit Lions? Do you believe?
Oh my God. It was, this beginning of the season was really disappointing. You know, I mean, obviously, yeah, I think that he has that team believing, and it just shows you the power of that, right?
Yeah.
The power of attitude and the teamwork and everybody together, that it's pretty dang special. So watch what they've done the last 4 weeks. You know, really, even Thanksgiving Day, it was incredible. You know, I mean, they lost to the Bills, and you know, Don Barone and I were texting back and forth. He's a huge Bills fan. I'm a Lions fan. They've had a lot more success over the years. I haven't, but they lost that game. And they shouldn't have. I mean, I think that Dan Campbell cost them that game and some of those decisions. But and early in the year, you know, I didn't agree. But I mean, I like the fire and the energy, and you can see it's a culture, and there's a big turnaround there. And as a lifelong Lions fan, I'm pretty excited.
It's been a lot of fun to watch, and I'm a much bigger Lions fan nowadays than I am a Bills fan. And I actually love the Bills. That's what sucks. Like, I live closer to the Bills than anything, but being such a Chiefs fan, I kind of have to hate the Bills. But if the Bills don't beat the Chiefs this year, they're never going to beat them, is my take on it. Because I mean, they've literally spent, I mean, other than the bad luck with Von Miller, I mean, they've got all of every piece that I see available, and I'm like, Chiefs, get it. The Bills grab it. I mean, it was kind of like the Rams last year. I mean, the same thought process.
They know their window, and I think they're and Josh Allen is an amazing quarterback. I like him better than Patrick Mahomes, I'll be honest with you.
Well, I mean, a lot of people don't like Patrick Mahomes, and that's fine. A lot of people didn't like Tom Brady throughout his career either. And why do you like Josh better than Mahomes?
I like Patrick Mahomes. I think he's the smartest, fastest thinking quarterback that I've probably ever seen in the league. He's very athletic. He can make things happen. He's a game changer. He's definitely the Mount Rushmore of the quarterbacks that are out there. I think Josh Allen's has that. He's super smart as well, but he's physically a bigger, more durable. I mean, and I should clarify that if I wanted to say, hey, I want to pick my quarterback for the next 10 years for the Lions, I just feel like his shelf life is going to be there. Patrick scares me when he's running around. If he gets one really bad hit, because we've seen it. I mean, Matt Stafford, what a Stafford fan I was forever with the Lions, still am. And man, he just always had a tough time with his line. And, I mean, he missed a couple of seasons with injuries. He had a lot of injuries, and he's tough, been sacked a lot and that, but you lose that guy and where's your team? You lose Patrick Mahomes and you're done. The Bills lose Josh Allen, it's over. I mean, some of these other teams, look at the Rams the year before. All they needed was Stafford. I mean, and he's a really good quarterback, but I mean, you just can't insert anybody in that position. And as good as the Chiefs are and the Bills are in other areas, those two guys are the reason that they're the top teams in the NFL.
Yeah. And dude, like you said earlier, you consider yourself lucky to have been part of the sport, to come along at a time when it was just been nothing but upward trajectory. I think we're really lucky as football fans. If you love football, I mean, I remember Peyton left, and I mean, we all thought Brady was gonna leave eventually. But he hasn't, but there was like a void, you know what I mean? There's something special when Brady plays Peyton, you know what I mean? When Brady plays Aaron Rodgers, like when you see those, and it's awesome to look at Burrow, Josh Allen. There's so many incredible Herbert. There's so many incredible quarterbacks, and I think we'll have lots to argue about for many years to come.
It's going to be an interesting postseason for sure.
It sure is. Kevin Van Dam, I'm sorry this was so long, but dude, I get listening to somebody. I mean, I appreciate your openness and honesty, and I mean, I'm going to talk to you more in the future here, but have a Merry Christmas.
You bet, buddy. Happy holidays, everybody.